Natural and man-made disasters can throw a city, county, or state into disarray. There can be many moving parts to response and recovery, and many agencies involved in relief efforts. Electricity is crucial to these efforts, yet losing power is an almost inevitable consequence of a disaster. That's why it's so important to get temporary emergency power to critical facilities up and running as soon as possible after a disaster. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is responsible for this essential task, as assigned by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA. The Corps can deploy the teams, expertise, equipment, and other resources necessary to execute the mission. State, U.S. territory, and tribal authorities can request federal assistance following a presidentially declared disaster, such as a hurricane, tornado, earthquake, or flood. That's when FEMA will decide if a temporary emergency power mission is necessary for response and recovery efforts. The Corps of Engineers is prepared to provide temporary emergency power assistance for critical public facilities, including hospitals, emergency response centers, public shelters, and water and wastewater treatment plants. Following a disaster, states, U.S. territories, and tribal governments work with their communities to prioritize facilities requiring temporary power. Generally, priority is first given to those facilities deemed as life-saving, such as 911 emergency response centers, police and fire stations, and medical facilities. The next priority is the life-sustaining facilities, such as public shelters and water and wastewater treatment plants. Generators can then be provided to other critical public facilities as needed. Prior to an imminent and anticipated disaster or notice event such as a hurricane, FEMA will often request that the Corps of Engineers deploy resources, personnel, and equipment to the event area in order to expedite the installation of generators once the event has occurred. Having the teams and equipment in place prior to a notice event allows the Corps to rapidly provide life-saving and life-sustaining emergency power support to the impacted area. The Corps maintains a large contingent of resources used to supply temporary emergency power needs. These include, but are not limited to, planning and response teams, or PRTs, contractors, the 249th Engineer Battalion, and subject matter experts, or SMEs. The emergency power PRTs are responsible for managing the execution of the mission, from the assessments of the critical facilities through the installation and operation and maintenance of generators. Emergency power PRTs also manage the removal or deinstallation of generators and ensure that they are repaired as needed for the next mission. There are 7 trained and ready emergency power PRTs strategically located throughout the nation. Having many teams trained and ready provides the capability to respond to several states and multiple disasters with minimal delay. To expedite support for the temporary emergency power mission, USACE has pre-awarded national contracts with companies that have the expertise and resources required to support the hauling, installing, refueling, servicing, and deinstalling of generators. These Advanced Contract Initiatives, or ACIs, save time and money and allow the Corps to plan and train with private sector partners to ensure effective and efficient disaster response. Another key asset for successfully executing the temporary emergency power mission is the 249th Engineer Battalion, also known as Prime Power. The 249th consists of highly trained soldiers who provide worldwide power generation and power systems infrastructure support for the U.S. Army. After a disaster strikes, the 249th deploys to critical public facilities to perform pre-installation inspections, or PIIs. These PIIs ensure that the correct generators and supplies are provided to safely and successfully provide temporary emergency power to that impacted facility. The Corps also maintains a cadre of temporary emergency power subject matter experts, or SMEs. The SMEs are highly trained individuals with the extensive experience required to solve the complex problems of this high-priority mission. The Corps of Engineers relies on FEMA to supply most of the generators required for the temporary emergency power mission. FEMA Logistics maintains a federal inventory of approximately 1,200 generators. These generators are strategically located at a variety of FEMA distribution centers, including Moffett Field, California, Atlanta, Georgia, Fort Worth, Texas, Hawaii, Guam, Puerto Rico, and Frederick, Maryland. If extra generators are required, or if FEMA does not have a required generator in stock, the Corps of Engineers also maintains a pre-awarded contract that can be used to rent or lease additional generators as needed. FEMA also maintains kits called Bill of Materials, or BOMs. These kits have the cables, clamps, ground rods, connectors, tools, and other equipment needed to connect the generators to a critical facility. There are many different positions that make up a mission planning and response team. An action officer is common to all PRTs, including temporary power. The Temporary Power Team Action Officer works with FEMA and the supported state's Temporary Emergency Power Point of Contact, or POC. Together, they determine generator priorities, locations, and facility points of contact. It is important to understand that local authorities must provide generator assistance requests to their state emergency management representatives. The state then prioritizes the requirements and provides that prioritized list to FEMA and the Corps of Engineers. Once the Corps receives a prioritized list from the state, USACE will deploy the 249th Engineer Battalion Pre-Installation Inspection Teams, or PITs, to the critical facilities to determine generator requirements. In larger multi-state events where the 249th resources are taxed, the Corps may also task their electrical contractors to perform PIIs. If a facility PII has been performed in advance as a disaster preparedness measure, then a post-disaster PII is not required. Having facility PII data available in advance significantly expedites the overall generator installation process.
I'm Sergeant First Class Pileski. I'm with the United States Army Corps of Engineers, 249th Engineer Battalion, Prime Power. We're working with FEMA to support the National Response Plan, doing assessments for emergency generators to areas that have lost power due to Hurricane Ike. Today we are at the Galveston Community Center, looking at an area where FEMA, the Texas Army National Guard, and a medical center all are looking to begin their operations here. So today we're doing an assessment on the entire building from front to back to fully power all their operations. We started out by going into the main electrical panel, seeing what voltage was feeding in, how it was configured, and where the voltages were running and what their major loads were. From there we also looked outside at the transformers feeding the building, looking for different connection points and looking for the absolute max power that the building could handle. We also needed to go outside to check the refrigeration units to see what power they needed. To complete our assessment, we took the square footage of the building and the different uses of the rooms in the building, figured out the power that they're going to need, added in the power of those refrigeration units and the extra power needed for the medical center, put them together, and we'll calculate and assess load for that. We also had to cite where the generator would be placed and how it would be connected to the building. We're here from Fort Belvoir, Virginia. We just get a last-minute call. Anytime there's a hurricane, someone from our battalion will respond with FEMA to install generators and emergency power, get people powered back up, start resuming operations so that cities can return back to normalcy and can start going back to their regular operations and recover from whatever disaster has hit. It's a pretty satisfying mission. We know we're going out, we're using all our technical skills, all the academic training that we've had, and we're going out, we're helping people.
The Corps of Engineers typically installs approximately 20 generators per day. Of course, this depends on the travel time from the staging area to the critical facilities needing power. USACE teams usually work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. However, due to safety concerns and often the lack of nighttime staffing at the critical facilities, the generator installation teams typically work from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Outside of those hours, the USACE teams are prepping and loading generators to be installed the next morning and conducting round-the-clock fueling services on generators. A generator is ready to be deinstalled when the Critical Public Facility (POC) and the state agree that commercial power has been restored or another emergency power source has been provided and the generator is no longer required. The Corps of Engineers contractor verifies that the facility has an alternate means of power. If it is commercial power, they will coordinate the disconnection of the federal generator with the local power company to assure commercial power can be sustained to that facility. Once the generator is no longer required for the disaster response, the Corps of Engineers restores the generator to make sure that it is capable for the next mission. The Corps also prepares generators for return to storage at the FEMA distribution centers. One important step that a state can take following a disaster is to identify a temporary emergency power POC at the State Emergency Operations Center. This POC will coordinate with local and federal partners and will oversee the identification and prioritization of generator requirements. A state also can develop a pre-event list of critical public facilities and have that list available at the state EOC when an event happens. States can work with critical public facility owners and operators to have licensed electricians or other electrical personnel perform pre-event assessments. States can also encourage facility owners to procure generators at critical facilities so that those generators are readily available following a disaster. If a generator cannot be acquired, the state can encourage critical facility owners to obtain and install transfer switches to expedite generator installations. Finally, states are encouraged to develop contracts and procure and/or lease generators so that they can perform the temporary power mission on their own or in coordination with the Corps of Engineers. The temporary emergency power mission truly is a whole community effort that requires the collaboration of local, state, and federal officials, facility managers, and the private sector. In the days and weeks following a major disaster that disrupts the commercial power grid, generators provide life-saving and life-sustaining support to disaster survivors. The United States Army Corps of Engineers is ready and able to provide support to FEMA and work with state and local partners to meet their temporary emergency power needs to help save and sustain lives and ultimately recover from a disaster.